Hello, welcome to an adventure. I hope that things are working correctly. How is everybody? Hopefully some of you are here and things are going well, and I hope that you had a good week last week while I was out. Oh, shoot. 1 second. I just realized we don't have merged chat yet, which happens here. Sorry. And I forgot to turn on 2 of the captioners. This is fine. Things are going well. How is everybody? We should be good to go now. We should have all of the chat shared between the 2 channels. And yeah, hopefully people are... Oh, geez. If you couldn't tell, some of the setup has changed. I mean, you shouldn't necessarily be able to tell yet, but it's not optimized quite yet. So we'll get there. But welcome, everybody. Let's see who's here. I see Matt M33. Wait, did it enable it? What? Okay, sorry. Hello, Matt M33. It's good to see you. Are those capybara emotes? They are. That's so cute. And I saw Hannah. Hello. Anybody else that's here? Hello. I know I am a bit distracting. But what? Off. Why forget do that? Well, whatever. I think I have fixed it now so that it shouldn't do that again. As I said, actually, let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Welcome to Archival Adventures. I am Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech, also known throughout on the Twitcherverse place as Rogan27. And this is a show that I do where I share materials from special collections and university archives at Virginia Tech. And so it streams both to my personal channel, twitch.tv/Rogan27, as well as the University Library's Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/VTUL Studios. So you can watch on either one. The chat is shared between them. Let's see. So yeah, I have had an upgrade slightly. As I said, it's not fully implemented yet, but I have a stream deck to help run the stream now at work. And I almost have all of the access I need to make it work properly. Hang on 1 second. It is quite warm in this spot right now, so I'm turning on a fan. Also, how is the volume for the music / microphone? Because I was messing with everything, and it was supposed to reduce the volume on the music before turning on the camera, so hopefully it did that. I have no idea. But yes, I have a stream deck. Also, I got the new document camera, so hopefully things will be less jittery, shaky, because no matter how much I bump the table and move things around, I can pause the live video. So you'll just get a still image of what we're looking at, and the table can shake all at once. Also, I don't think it'll shake nearly as much, because how it is in place is a bit sturdier. So, but yeah, all of this stuff came in like 2 weeks ago. But I didn't get to start setting it up until this week because I had medical stuff last week and had to cancel the stream. And so it's partially set up. Hi, Puddleglam. It is good to see you. Thank you so much for the 41-month resubscription. Also, I realize I'll make it work for this stream, but the stream deck is on the wrong side. Anyway, because we're looking at historical items and they are owned by an institution, we just take a moment to acknowledge the history of the institution. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia. Sorry, hang on one second. I should... Sorry. And it still went to emote only. Grr. I bumped a button and I didn't mean to bump the button. Like I said, new tech in place. It's gonna be fine. We've been through this before. Can you all still hear me? I hope. I think so. Oh, good. This is fine. There's a reason that one of my emotes on my channel is the burning room dog with the "this is fine." Anyway. Let me try this one more time here. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their land and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in California and other areas in the West. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution, the Preston and Olin Institute, and they also worked on the construction of its building. If you want the full-length version, it is available there. As of yesterday, I haven't checked today. I assume it's still there for now. If it moves, we will update. If anybody was paying attention to goings on at Virginia Tech yesterday, or this week, or last week? No, this week. The Board of Visitors had a meeting yesterday, and they passed something that reaffirmed our commitment to our approach to diversity and inclusion stuff, but also said that we will work to comply with all laws as they're changing. So I don't know exactly what that means going forward, and nobody does. And so we will stumble merrily forward. I don't know. we're gonna move forward with that. I am so sorry. I am just flailing all over the place right now. I may have been like rushing to get things in place for today. So apologies if I'm a little scattered. You might have noticed on my channel the tag's ADHD, or the tag ADHD, which is accurate. That said, what are we looking at today? Today being the last Wednesday of the month, we have our 7th instance, or the 7th item from the list of so-called classics of science fiction. The list being from 1940, from a sci-fi, like, you know, it'd be great if I had this written down. Anyway, Sam Moskowitz, who was a thank you very much, Hannah, that is helpful. He wrote a letter to the editor of Comet, and when we were looking at that Spec Fiction magazine a while back, we read the letter to the editor, and it had a whole list of like stories that he called out as being classics of science fiction. They were all from Astounding stories. They were all edited by the same person, the person that started Comet. But I wasn't terribly familiar with all of them, and I was curious to see, would they stand up to the designation as classics? And indeed, I'm trying to open the list right now, but I think a lot of them have held up well. I don't have it in place right now. By next month, I will. I don't have it set up so I can just push a button and bring up the graphic, the picture of the list from the... Anyway. The 7th instance, the one that we're doing today, is a story called Rex. It is written by author Harl Vincent, and the story itself does not have a full entry in the Science Fiction and Fantasy Encyclopedia, so the best we've got as far as like about the story specifically is just the entry in the Internet Science Fiction Database, which, if you're not familiar, is basically like IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, or IBDB, the Internet Broadway Database, except it's about science fiction, specifically. And so if you're at all familiar with those are not authoritative sources for research purposes, because they are community-generated resources, but they're often really good as far as like getting primer information, or they're generally fairly accurate. They're just not reliable for research purposes. But we're not doing research. We're just taking a look at things and want some general knowledge. So, general knowledge. Anyway, author Harl Vincent. It was published in June of 1934. It is a short story. Apparently, it was illustrated by Elliot Dold. Congrats, Matt M33, on being randomly selected as a VIP for the stream. Enjoy your digital diamond next to your name, as well as the ability to adjust pun points. So the first publication was in Astounding Stories, edited by F. Orland Tremaine in June of 1934. It didn't appear again until 1963, when it was included in the compilation The Coming of the Robots. And then from then on, it's basically just in compilations about robots. So I don't know much about it, but we're going to learn. First, who the heck was Harl Vincent? Harl Vincent was born October 19th, 1893, and died in May of 1968. It was a pen name for Harold Vincent Shepflin? Shepflin? That is a somewhat challenging combination of letters, but something like Shepflin or Skeflin. I don't know, something along those lines. Sadly, there's no pronunciation listed. He was a mechanical engineer and a sci-fi author, published regularly in pulp magazines. So I was familiar with his pen name previously. This illustration here, it says, was from the September 1929 issue of Air Wonder Stories. I don't know if we have that. Let's find out. If I'm too scattered, rein me in. But now I'm very curious. Air Wonder Stories. Kieran's back. We do have some issues of Air Wonder Stories. Looks like we have Volume 1, Number 1, Volume 1, Number 5 through 11. So we have the July 1929 as well as November 1929 through May of 1930. Cool. It's not one I was familiar with. We do not have the issue that this picture showed up in, apparently. So he went to Rensselaer Polytech. He was born in Buffalo, New York. I think we've talked about Rensselaer before. Because I think it came up in some of our nuclear science streams, but I don't know for sure. He didn't finish his freshman year there. He left so he could get married. Interesting. Worked at Westinghouse. Westinghouse, I am familiar with, but I don't know if everybody is. So, Westinghouse Electric, American manufacturing company, founded in 1886, headquartered in Pittsburgh. It was originally Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company. It was just a big name in like electrical production, consumer electronics, etc. Major supplier of generators, steam turbines, major player in nuclear power, starting with the Westinghouse atom smasher in 1937. So they were an electrical engineering brand until November of 1997, when they became CBS, which is not an electrical engineering firm. They are, Westinghouse, so in 95, Westinghouse bought CBS Television. And then the Westinghouse brand was retired in favor of CBS. Anyway, I know that Westinghouse shows up sometimes in sort of the Cthulhu type stories because it was a big name in like early electricity stuff. And so I know it'll show up in those kinds of stories. and Tesla kind of will show up. One of the two will. Anyway, he started writing after he began reading Hugo Gernsback's science fiction in Amazing Stories, which very similar to Astounding Stories, which is what we'll be looking at today. So his first published story, The Golden Girl of Munan, appeared in June of 1928 in Amazing Stories. And over the next 14 years, he published more than 70 science fiction stories. Wow. He ceased publishing during the early 1940s, moved to LA, joined the LA Science Fantasy Society and the Count Dracula Society, attended local sci-fi conventions, and then late in life he started writing again and published the novel The Doomsday Planet in 1966, and then a story called Invader in September of 67. I feel like I've heard of The Doomsday Planet before, but interestingly, it doesn't have a link. So there's not like a full entry on it anywhere. Rex doesn't show up in this list. I looked. And it does not appear in the list of his works on the Wikipedia article. I don't know why. Anyway, that's Harl Vincent. When I searched for him in the Science Fiction Fantasy Encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, sorry, online, the article that came up... Wait. I think I... Yeah, no, no. Okay. Wow. It was a general internet search for the title Rex and his name, Harl Vincent. And so this robots entry from the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction came up. And this entry, we may have looked at it before. It talks about, like, where did the word first come from? Carol Chapek's play, R.U.R. I don't actually know how that accented C is pronounced in Czech. Chapek is my best guess, but I don't actually know. But the word robot comes from a Czech word, robota. Statute labor. And apparently it was a commentary on slavery when it first appeared. Interesting. But we're interested in, what does this article have? So if you want to read about, like, the history of the word robot and its use in science fiction, definitely this looks like a pretty good article if you want just, like, general primer information. I'm curious, it talks here about female androids, which technically I believe are called gynoids. Let's see. I'm gonna do a keyword search. Haha! Okay. Early pulp magazine stories about robots are generally ambivalent. David Keller's The Psychophonic Nurse from 1928 is a cooperative servant, but no substitute for a mother's love. Abner Galula's Automation from November of 1931 in Amazing has lecherous designs on its creator's daughter and has to be destroyed. Oh my. Harl Vincent's Rex, June 1934, Astounding, the story that we're going to look at here in a minute, takes over the world and is about to remake man in the image of the robot when his regime is overthrown. but the balance soon but then the balance of the approach to robots in sci-fi soon swung in favor of sympathy. In Binder's The Robot Aliens, come in peace but are misunderstood and abused by hostile humans. Saccharine sentimentality is also in the ascendant in Helen O'Loy by Lester Del Rey. A man marries the ideal mechanical woman. Just from that description, I'm like, There was a movie a couple years ago about a guy falling in love with his AI assistant, right? Wasn't it a movie called Her? I wonder if it has any links back to that story. If you're familiar at all with sci-fi and robots, you might have heard of Asimov's laws of robotics. They came about well after the story that we will be looking at. Claims to have invented his laws of robotics in response to a technophobic Frankenstein complex, a term he introduced in Little Lost Robot. Apparently, John W. Campbell Jr. also helped to come up with them. Positronic robots. Which that definitely leads to like Commander Data on Star Trek. Also, if anybody knows more, do share, because I love to learn about this stuff. Okay, I just literally just mentioned Star Trek, and so now later on in the robot article, there is a link to the capital directive item of terminology popularized through Star Trek. To serve man, to obey, and to guard men from harm. Anyway. So that's out there. I don't know that that link was included because I found that just today. So if anybody wants to peruse that entry, it can be found there on the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction site. Again, so this is technically a wiki, so how much you want to rely on it for research purposes is going to be because it is an internet encyclopedia that people just basically anybody can register and edit. However, they do talk about their editorial practices. I have not reviewed them thoroughly enough to really say for sure whether this encyclopedia could be relied upon as a tertiary source for citation purposes. Wikipedia definitely doesn't work for that, but like potentially this could. It would depend on exactly what their editorial practices are, which was a bit lengthy, so I didn't want to go super far into it right now. That said, tertiary sources are not generally great anyway. I have some foam wedges today because this issue of Astounding is it's a bit crumbly. This issue of Astounding really demonstrates why these were called pulp. It is low quality paper, cheap paper, and was not expected to like last for a long time. And as we use it, little bits will fall off the edges of the page. And those little bits are referred to as criddle. The cover is not fully attached on this issue. We're losing bits around the edges. This one hasn't had any restoration work on it, but that won't really matter for reading the story. The biggest issue is that the story is in the very back of the issue. Hello! Welcome, Raiders. Welcome, 16-Bit Eric. It is great to see you. Hi, Whimsies. Hi, Whimsies. Wow. I'm a little scattered today, so I will try to stay on task. But it is great to see you. I hope that the rest of your stream went well. I hope that some of you might stay. We're gonna read a sci-fi story today. It is a story called Rex. It is by the author Harl Vincent, and it is from the June 1934 issue of Astounding Stories. So, welcome in, everybody. It is great to see you. Indeed. Thank you, Hannah, for giving a shout out to 16-Bit Eric. Anybody who's here who is not already following 16-Bit Eric, you should do so. Eric is a TTRPG actual play GM that some of you may know from his current work on the Stream Punks. Also, Eric is a budding comic book author and has done some, I guess the most recent would be The Rise of Hellfire from referencing, it's the Stranger Things comics. Wow. Like I said, I'm scattered today. Oh dear. Thank you to, I guess, Moobot. Yeah. Good job, Moobot. Okay. So, Astounding Stories. The illustration on the cover of this issue is not related to the story that we're reading today, but that's okay. Hello, Conciliates. Yes, this is pulp. This is really cheap paper and will fall apart as I use it. But yeah, this is Astounding Stories from June of 1934. You can see the cover is for Sidewise in Time by Murray Leinster. Let's see, Frank Kelly, Paul Ernst. I don't actually know a lot of the author names in this issue. Harl Vincent is probably the only author's name I was familiar with, and I don't think I'm familiar with any of his actual work. So, but the story we're looking for, Rex by Harl Vincent, is page 143, which, like I said, is at the very back, which is part of why I got the foam wedges, because there's already going to be enough criddle from just turning the pages, and if I had to fully open this, these pages are old enough and in a condition where flattening this book would likely just break the page and it would come off of the magazine altogether. So having the foam wedges helps to sort of keep the gutter, it's a little bit up instead of being completely flat. It's held a little bit at an angle to protect the spine and keep things from falling apart. So we're going to look at this story, Rex by Harl Vincent. Um, new camera. So we will work with this. Illustrated by Elliot Dold. And you can see this lovely illustration here of, we already know it's a robot story. It does sort of have like that Frankenstein's monster vibe to it. This being 1934, it would have been... It's after Metropolis. I don't remember how many years. Yeah, 1927 is Metropolis. Fritz Lang. And my brain does not math, so. Oh dear. 7 years. Thank you very much. Math in head, especially while being observed? No. So 7 years after the movie Metropolis, which was a very early film, but featured a female robot, and yeah. All right, let's see. I'm just gonna start reading now, and then I will be less scattered. But please comment as we go along. If you have thoughts, I'm gonna pause the image so that if I bump the table, then you won't know. Rex. It was a thing of glistening levers and bell cranks, of flexible shafting, cams, and delicate mechanical fingers, of vacuum tubes and photoelectric cells, of relays that clicked in ordered sequence when called upon to perform their myriad functions, of pumps, tanks, condensers, reactances, microphones, and loudspeakers. A robot, created by the master scientists of the 23rd century. I'm curious, I'm going to keep reading, but if somebody wants to look up for me, when did the idea of photoelectric cells get invented? Because 1934, I'm actually surprised to see the term photoelectric cells. And so if somebody feels like looking it up and sharing it in chat, that would be wonderful, because I'm really curious, but I don't want to go off on a complete tangent. But I'd be curious to know when photoelectric cells were invented. Or at least when the idea for them was thought up. Here was no ordinary robot, like those innumerable others engaged in the performance of man's tasks, but an aristocrat among them, a super robot. The robot surgeon, it was sometimes called, and indeed the term was most appropriate, for this robot was chief of the mechanicals. Its control tubes and relays provided the ability not only to diagnose swiftly and unerringly the slightest electrical or mechanical faults of the lesser robots, but to supervise their correction. Ooh, thank you, Hannah. The concept of the photoelectric effect was initially recognized by Alexandre Edmond Becquerel. I'm sure I mispronounced it. My apologies. Who found that light exposure could enhance the voltage in certain types of batteries. Later, Julius Elster and Hans Friedrich Geidel created a functional photoelectric cell in 1904. That is way earlier than I expected. Alexandre Edmond Becquerel died in 1891. Okay, so the idea, the concept for photoelectric was prior to 1891. The first functional photoelectric cell was 1904. Interesting. And the idea came up because light exposure could enhance the voltage in certain types of batteries. The idea of batteries goes back to ancient history, or prehistory. I don't know exactly when. Ooh, thank you for linking the wiki, because I'll have to take a look at that later. It's just really interesting. I wasn't expecting to see that terminology in a 1934 story. Clearly, I don't know enough about the history of photovoltaics, photoelectrics. All right. Oh, sorry. Man, in his desire for a life of ease and luxury, had created the robots. In his conceit, he had constructed most of them in his own likeness, or at least with some resemblance to that which he considered as the ideal of physical being. Even the lowliest of the robots was provided with 2 legs on which he walked erect, a head surmounting a cylindrical body, arms and hands of a sort. Some of them had more than the conventional 2 arms in order to multiply their usefulness, but all of them presented an appearance more or less human-like. This was particularly so of the robot surgeon. The marvelous mechanisms were housed in a body like the Greek gods, the covering of which was made from an elastic, tinted material that had all the feel and appearance of human flesh and epidermis. The electric eye lenses in their socket, the electric eye lenses looked like human optics and moved in their sockets in a most lifelike manner. There was a wig of curly brown hair, as well as eyelashes and brows. They had gone so far as to attire the body in the habiliment of a man. Habiliment. I don't actually know the correct pronunciation for that word. It refers to like typical clothing that somebody would wear. What's the etymology? Characteristic apparatus. Middle French. Habillement. Hi, Meridu. How are you? They'd gone so far as to attire the body in the habiliment of a man. Laughingly, one of the artists engaged in perfecting the final likeness to man had called the robot surgeon Rex. These are sounding a lot like LMD, life model decoys from the Marvel comics. I'm not familiar. If you have a resource you want to share on that, feel free. I don't know the comics very well at all, but that's mostly just because I didn't have spending money to buy comics with, so I never really read very many of them. The name had stuck. It, too, was most appropriate. More, it was prophetic. Although sexless, Rex was never considered anything but masculine. He was man's most perfect servant. Every verbal instruction he carried out to the letter, whether this instruction was given by word of mouth from near at hand or through the radio impulses that could be conveyed to his mechanical brain from a distance. Of course, there was a code which only selected few of the scientists knew. Otherwise, Rex might have been ordered about by unauthorized persons. His memory never failed. There might have been a catastrophe in which hundreds of lesser robots were mangled, necessitating the reading to him of pages of detailed directions. No matter. Rex's mechanical brain recorded everything. Without further attention, he would labor 24 hours a day with his core of mechanicals until the damage was repaired. A huge factory was his workshop and laboratory. In it, his robot assistants worked at forge, bench, or machine with a precision that had never been equaled by a human artisan. After that first set of instructions from human lips, Rex worked out all the details of the work to be done, diagnosing the mechanical ills of his mechanical patients and prescribing unfailingly the remedies. His own orders, likewise, were issued by word of mouth, in a sonorous metallic basso, or by radio waves in cases where that was necessary. No human being was in Rex's robot hospital when it was operating. No supervising human mind was needed. There were, of course, periodic inspections of Rex's mechanisms by skilled mechanicals, who then worked under the direction of one of the human scientists, replacement of tubes and adjustments of the delicate relays, rebalancing of the gyro motors which preserved his equilibrium. Otherwise, he demanded no attention at all. But there came a day when something went wrong, which puzzled the scientists. Rex's body continued to function as it always had, but the mechanical brain lapsed suddenly into a series of errors. In a perfectly simple problem of calculus, he had arrived at a solution that was incorrect and utterly impossible. They dismantled the intricate mechanisms of his brain, replaced all of the tubes and condensers, and adjusted the relays. When they reassembled the parts, the scientists knew beyond shadow of doubt that everything was in perfect order. What puzzled them was the fact that the replacements and adjustments had not been really necessary. In their careful examination and testing, they had not found a single flaw in the mechanism. After that, they watched Rex closely for several days, taking note of all his movements and reactions. But they observed no tendency to a repetition of his previous lapse. What they did not know was that a change had taken place, one not visible to the eye, nor subject to detection in any test they were able to devise, but nevertheless a change, and an important one, to Rex. The shifting to a new orbit of a single electron in an atom of tantalum contained in one of the essential parts. A change which provided a source of internal radiant energy of new and unknown potentiality. A change in that marvelous mechanical brain. Okay, is tantalum just unobtainium? Or is that real? No, it's real. Tantalum. Tantalum is a chemical element. It has the symbol Ta and atomic number 73. It's named after Tantalus, a figure in Greek mythology. Tantalum is a very hard, ductile, lustrous blue-gray transition metal that is highly corrosion resistant. It is part of the refractory metals group, which are widely used as components of strong, high melting point alloys. It is a group 5 element along with vanadium and niobium. It always occurs in geologic sources together with the chemically similar niobium, mainly in the mineral groups tantalite, columbite, and coltan. Huh. It's between hafnium and tungsten. but it wasn't. I did not know that. Neat. Oh, thank you for dropping the link in there, Hannah. That is the link for life model decoys from Marvel Comics. So I will follow up on that later. Rex had begun to think for himself and to reason. His reasoning was that of a logician, coldly analytical, swift and precise, uninfluenced by sentiment. No human emotion stirred in his mechanical breast. Rex had no heart, no soul. For a long time, he concealed his new powers from those who had him in charge, reasoning that only by so doing would he have opportunity to develop these powers. He carried out his routine instructions to the letter, but now delegated the major portion of the supervision to a certain few of his assistants, in whose robot brains he made the necessary alterations to permit them taking over the work. This left him the leisure time for a study of the world about him and of its creatures. The tilder of LMD. Shield-designed robots whose skin is made of a rare metal called epidurium. That one would be the unobtainium. And whose purpose is to take the form of a living person, thus making a duplicate. Oh, they're replicants. Okay. LMDs are based on Da Vinci's original prototype. Yeah, like they sound like full-on replicants, or like the human form replicators from Stargate or something like that. And yeah, I guess Rex also seems kind of similar in form, at least. Much of his time was spent in the library of the human scientists which adjoined the research laboratory. Here, he studied reel after reel of the sight-sound recordings covering history, biography, art, and the sciences. He spent many hours at the amplifiers and viewing plate of the newscast apparatus. And he came to the conclusion that things in the world of which he was a part were not as they should be. United North America, he learned, was completely isolated from the rest of the world. It comprised a vast area of wasteland, where vegetation was rank and prolific, where only wild creatures roamed. All humanity of the continent was housed in enormous structures, which were the 11 cities. New York, his own city, was the greatest of these and was the seat of government and of learning. Stupendous in size, a great crystal-roofed structure, towering to a height of 100 levels, and sprawling its length of full 30 miles along the Hudson River. Communication with the other cities was maintained by television radio. Traffic by robot-operated stratosphere planes. In the upper levels of the cities dwelt humanity. In the lower levels and in the bowels of the earth, the robots labored unceasingly. The humans were greatly outnumbered by the robots. Okay, the structure of this city reminds me a bit of the Star Wars planet Coruscant, except that that city spans the entire planet, but like the many, many levels with like people up top and unpeople below. It feels very much like Coruscant. Reasoning that all was not told in the histories or newscasts, Rex devised an instrument which enabled him to bring to the viewing plates and amplifiers the sights and sounds of public meeting places and ways, and even those of the private chambers of man's living quarters. He sent out searching rays which penetrated all materials and sought out the information he needed for a complete analysis of conditions as they were. The apparatus was so connected that it might respond either to the regular newscast waves or to those of his own searching rays at will. His knowledge broadened. He endeavored to reach the far continents with his searching ray, intending to check historical and geographical records of warring and backward races of mankind. Oh dear. Can we get a historical terms in there, please? Backward races. Oh, that one is a little bit problematical there. But he found this impossible. For the scientists of United North America had erected a wall of highly charged, ionized air surrounding the continent. It was utter isolation, a wall impassable from without and within. The investigations on which Rex had embarked were, perforce, confined to the 11 cities. Here, he saw, mankind was divided roughly into 3 classes: the political, or ruling body, the thinkers, or scientists, and the great mass of those who lived only for the gratification of their senses. A strange economic system was in vogue. An effort had been made to divide all wealth equally, the medium of exchange being paper vouchers, which were printed by the government. These supposedly were secured by real wealth, materials, and goods, which actually were the product of robot labor. But the robots needed no medium of exchange, so these vouchers had been equally distributed among the humans at some time in the past. They no longer remained that way. Gambling by the pleasure seekers, rash expenditures for chattels of the luxury class, thefts from them, especially by those who were known as political grafters, had reduced their circumstances. The thinkers, who were the only ones following occupations at all useful, had let their wealth slip through unheeding fingers. The class in power, the individual minions of the government, acquired the great share of the wealth as regulatory and discriminatory legislation increased restrictions on the mass of the people. Rex could see no logic at all in any of this. Yet again, a story from 1934 feels oddly relevant to today. Not that there wouldn't be any relevance, but it's more... It's easier to take that description and hang it on possible near futures of today. Much easier than one would expect. Which, I suppose technically, means that this story does fit the definition of classic. Because it holds together in the point of the story. What it is saying about society is still relevant nearly 100 years later, which that feels like it fits the definition of classic to me. Seeking an explanation, he observed more closely the lives and actions of individuals. He studied the habits of humans and quickly learned that the most powerful of human emotions centered in the mating instinct. He watched many affairs between male and female and soon knew the difference between the real lasting affection, of which there were few instances, and the transitory infatuation, which was based on nothing but the physical. He saw no logic in these things either. Fear, hate, envy, malice. He studied them all. Avarice, lust, anger, treachery, infidelity. There was plenty of material for his researches. Occasionally he glimpsed situations in which feelings of a finer sort were exhibited. Faith, loyalty, gratitude, honesty, love. He reasoned from this that the creature called man had originally been of a most superior sort. He had only developed baser instincts and neglected the cultivation of his better side. Rex peered into a white-walled room where human surgeons operated on human patients. He observed that their procedure was much the same as his own, that they dissected the body or head or other portions of human anatomy and made repairs, in similar manner to that which he used on his own robot patients. Forthwith, he began, in the library, an extensive study of the human brain and anatomy. And then he was discovered at his unheard-of labors. Shelby, an engineer of the Robot Inspection Corps, came upon him while he was in the library viewing and listening to a reel which dealt with surgery of the human brain. Shelby was a small man with thick lenses before his eyes, with high, bulging forehead and receding chin. On his upper lip was a patchy growth of sandy hair. He emitted a squeal of terror when he saw what Rex was doing. 4296 AR-21, he quavered. This was the code that ordinarily had started the functioning of the robot surgeon. Rex turned upon him the impassive stare of his robot eyes. Of his own volition, he stopped the progressive clicking of relays, which should have followed upon the reception of the code by his microphonic ears. His customary response, ready for orders, failed to issue from the flexible lip members that formed the sound wave outlet from his loudspeaker throat. Shelby paled. Rex advanced upon him with the calm deliberation of the machine he had not ceased to be. Shelby, he intoned, you have arrived at precisely the right moment. I need you in my research work. Seeing the powerful, steel-sinewed arms stretch forth, Shelby screamed as only a man in the face of death screams. It was necessary for Rex to bang the man's head against the metal partition to silence his outcries. Then the engineer went limp. Rex was prepared for such an eventuality. He had sent out his chief mechanicals to raid one of the hospitals of the upper levels and had equipped a complete operating room of his own adjoining the library. He carried Shelby to the operating table and etherized him. He then proceeded to dissect the man and to study his organs, giving particular attention to the brain and certain of the nerve centers. As the work progressed, he carefully sewed each severed part with minute stitches, restoring each to its original condition. No human surgeon had ever learned in a lifetime of effort a 10th part of what Rex discovered in 2 hours of work. Eventually, he found that which he sought. A tiny arrangement of segregated brain cells, which formed the seat of human emotion. He preserved the mass carefully for future experiment, replacing it with a prepared capsule of platinum, before closing the opening in the skull and suturing the long scalp incision. Amazingly, Shelby's heart continued to beat. The man had remarkable vitality, and Rex had worked with a skill such as no human surgeon possessed. After the injection into the patient's veins of a pint of saline solution, Shelby was carried to the purloined hospital bed. One of the chief mechanicals, primed with definite instructions by Rex, was given the task of nursing him. A lot of this description reminds me of, I'd say, like a combination of Mr. Spock and Data from Star Trek The Next Generation. Although they wouldn't have been portrayed as so unfeeling as to hurt someone so they could dissect them and then sew them back together. But I'm curious how much influence this story might have had on the development of those two characters. I don't know if it had any, but I see some parallels. Rex had conceived of and planned for the creation of ideal beings and an ideal condition of existence. He saw the superiority of the robot over man in bodily strength, endurance, and deathlessness, and yet reasoned that there was something in man which would be of benefit to the robot, if only man's capacity for emotion, for experiencing pain and pleasure. Might be incorporated in the robot body and logically controlled, the perfect being would result. Ideal conditions of existence were bound to ensue. So we have a robot intelligence that does not have emotions, but thinks that having emotions would be good. Logical being with superior strength. Yeah, I definitely see parallels between this and the Vulcans in Star Trek. I see parallels between this and definite parallels between this story and Commander Data in Star Trek The Next Generation. Reason told him that his first step to that end must be to take control of mankind and its purposeless affairs. Okay, maybe more like lore than data. He set the workshop humming in the construction of 11 super robots, one to be sent to each of the North American cities to organize the lesser robots and take control of the government. It was a simple matter to convey them to their assigned posts in the 11 cities, since all of the airlines were robot-operated. Then Rex loosed the blow which stunned the population of United North America. I just realized why the story said that Rex was an appropriate prophetic name. Rex meaning king or ruler. He constructed a complicated radio transmitter and broadcast a heterodyning frequency over the robot control waveband. That sounds like technobabble, but it's probably actually more accurate than most sci-fi technobabble. He constructed a complicated radio transmitter and broadcast a heterodyning frequency over the robot control waveband, a frequency that rendered the receptor apparatus of every last one of the robots unresponsive to human commands, and responsive only to those of the new master robot and his 11 chief aides. Okay, now I'm getting, like, hints of the Cybermen from Doctor Who. In one stroke was obtained control of nearly 1 billion robots, and through this, dominion over the 300 millions of human beings. Rex had justified his name. He was virtually king of United North America. It was a general strike of the robots insofar as the orders of their former masters were concerned. Hello, Elixir! Sneaks in, hears talk of robot overlords, run away! You're chatting on the internet. It might be best not to upset our future robot overlords. Um, Personal robot servants refused to perform their daily tasks. Transportation and communication were paralyzed. Again, historical terms. Um, the factories, including those which produced the synthetic food on which humankind subsisted, were no longer turning out their products. There was no water, for the huge pumps had been stopped, and the filter and reservoir valves closed. All were robot operated. Everything on which man depended for his very existence was made or supplied by the robots, and now this supply was cut off. Now I'm getting a little Wall-E in there as well. Pandemonium reigned in the upper levels, with hysteria and rioting. Only the huge power plants remained in operation, and this for the reason that their radio-transmitted energy was the very life of the robots. Without this energy, their motors could not operate. Even to Rex himself, all would be inert masses of metal and glass and rubber. But this continuance of the power supply was of some little comfort to the human beings of the upper levels. Their sun lamps still burned. Anticipating organized and armed attacks by humankind, Rex devised an invisible, impenetrable barrier of electronic vibrations, force field, which could be set up by the regular broadcast power. He caused the power plants themselves to be surrounded by these barriers, as well as providing them for the protection of the individual robots in the form of an enclosing bubble. Bulletproof, flameproof, impervious to the freezing ray of human scientists, these enclosures yet permitted each robot to carry on his newly appointed tasks without encumbrance. So Rex gains sentience, and his first major acts are violence and dictatorship. Yeah, this is going to end well. Hannah, I don't know what you mean. Every single paragraph, every time he describes something about what Rex is doing, the abilities of the robots, the technology, and all of it has been in sci-fi media for decades since this story. Like, I'm just, every new paragraph I see, oh, that's an element of that, and that's an element of that, and wow, I'm curious. I would be really, really curious to know, like, how many of these ideas is he drawing from previous works and gestalting together into this story, versus how many of these ideas are original to this story and then influence later work. Because, like I said a little bit ago, I definitely think this meets the definition of classic. So many elements of this story have become tropes that are reused and reused and reused to tell stories, especially now that we're getting towards the era where more computer automation is happening, and the buzzword of the day is AI, and yeah. Rex observed with his searching ray the reactions of the populace. He saw mad orgies of debauchery among some who considered that the end of the world was at hand, saw rapine, murder, and worse. He peered into the laboratories of scientists and saw them laboring as they had not labored in years, seeking for means of regaining control of the recalcitrant mechanical slaves. Yeah, there's some iRobot vibes for sure. Later, when it was apparent to him that starvation and thirst had reduced the populace to a receptive state, he cut in on the newest wave band and delivered his ultimatum. I am Rex, he told the 11 cities. Master of robots and men, I come to you in the name of pure logic as the protagonist of a new era in which man, who created the machines, will obtain real rather than fancied benefit from them. I come to evolve a new race of beings and to promote the growth of knowledge and the advancement of science in United North America. It is necessary that I take the reins of a government for a space of time sufficient to allow of the perfection of my plan. Therefore, I, Rex, formerly the robot surgeon of level 37 in New York City, do hereby demand the immediate surrender to me of the President of the Union, together with all members of his cabinet. I further demand that the chief scientists and chief surgeons of the 11 cities come to me at once for consultation. Commencing now, the old order of things is to be reversed. All male and female citizens will be assigned to regular tasks at which they must labor as prescribed by the robots. As soon as the orders I transmit through my robot servants shall have been obeyed, water and food will be available for all human beings of the cities. The citizens of the Union are once more to work for their living. Failure to obey means continued hunger and thirst, annihilation. This is all for the present. Oh, lovely. You can add psychological warfare to Rex's resume. Shelby was convalescing, propped up in a wheelchair, when the delegations began to arrive. His wounds had healed speedily under the treatment Rex had administered. The use of his body was almost recovered. As far as memory and intelligent use of his faculties were concerned, his mind was normal. Otherwise, it was not. For one thing, he had lost his capacity of experiencing human feelings or emotions. For another, there was that tiny platinum capsule. The government officials, blustering and sputtering to hide their utter terror, were herded into a room where Rex placed them under heavy robot guard. He received the men of science in the research laboratory, which he had so elaborately expanded. It was a curious assemblage. 22 savants whose opinions on medical and scientific matters, although diverging wildly at times and causing much dissension in their own ranks, were accepted as the profoundest of wisdom by the general public. Unlike the president and his cabinet members, these men had come willingly, impelled by the curiosity, which was that quality of mind which held them to their normal pursuits. Not one of their number considered the radio pronouncement of the supposed Rex as anything but a hoax. There could be no scientific explanation for a robot with a thinking mind. Therefore, the thing was an impossibility. The men of science were not long in reversing their opinions, for Rex staged a demonstration which confounded them. Taking his stand at the visualizing screen of a micro X-ray, he addressed them in a manner that left no doubt as to his ability to reason and to perform feats of such scientific importance as to excel those of any human scholar. When he had properly impressed them, he came to the point. "You are here, gentlemen," he told them, "to assist me in the performance of a great and necessary work. The human population of United North America is to be remade along the lines which I shall lay down." The old social order is to pass out of existence. The government is to change hands and is to be completely reformed. Science is to rule. Ross Fielding, chief physicist of the Academy of Chicago, blurted out, "Preposterous!" It was as if Rex had not heard. He continued, "You men of the scientific world have long wanted to obtain control over mankind and its affairs. You medical men, through the so-called health boards and departments of hygiene and eugenics have already gone a long way toward this end. I now offer you the opportunity of exercising the power that you must admit you desire. A buzz of excitement, or a buzz of excited comment swept the group. Proceed, grunted Fielding, and others echoed his sentiment eagerly. Then hear my plan, said Rex. Under my direction, this group will immediately begin the work of reconstruction, by which I mean the actual remaking of men and women. The functioning of people's minds and bodies will be altered to fit them for the spheres of action which are to be assigned. All persons will have definite niches to fill in the new order of things, and each one will be made over to fit his or her own particular niche, both physically and mentally. Many will be provided with robot bodies. Yeah, Cybermen for sure. What? Shouted the noted Dr. Inez of Quebec. For answer, Rex depressed a button which lighted the visualizing screen at his side. On it flashed a greatly enlarged image of a mass of living cells. These, he explained, are cells from the brain of a living man. They comprise that portion of the brain which controls human feelings and emotions. I have already removed them from one Alexander Shelby. Whom many of you know personally. Naturally, he is greatly altered. There were horrified gasps. One of the surgeons started to argue against the possibility of what had been told them. Rex silenced them with a wave of his hand. A robot wheeled Shelby from the adjoining room and placed his head in the reflector focus of the micro X-ray. The image on the visualizer changed. There were the familiar skull outlines and the configurations of cerebrum and cerebellum. The focus altered and came sharply to a point where some of the cells had been removed and where an opaque spheroid was encountered. "What foreign object is that?" asked Inez. "It is one of my discoveries," Rex answered. "An important one. It replaces the center of emotion and human feelings in Shelby's brain, making him a slave to my every spoken and radioed command. Otherwise, the power of his mind is unimpaired. His faculties are as keen as they ever were, perhaps keener, only now his brain is that of a robot. Shelby is the first of the human robots and the most valuable. He is to be my lieutenant in the work that is to come and has been fully instructed by me. I leave you with Shelby now, gentlemen, knowing that you will proceed as he directs." Taking up the test tube containing the brain cells he had removed from Shelby, Rex stalked from the laboratory. His distinguished audience stared, aghast, at the man in the wheelchair. Fielding, who was a big man with whiskered jowls, exploded in his usual manner. "Of all the high-handed proceedings! How about this, Shelby?" "It is precisely as Rex has told you." Shelby's voice was flat and toneless, without inflection, the voice of a robot. "Our first step is to take the executive heads of the government in hand. They are to be operated upon at once and made as I am, subject to all orders of Rex. Sufficient of the platinum-cased mechanisms have already been fabricated." Suppose, chattered Lonergan, the Los Angeles scientist, "we refuse. Suppose we band together and overcome this mad robot." "Rex is far from being mad," intoned Shelby. "Besides, there are these." He indicated with extended forefinger the score of motionless robot figures ranged along the wall. At his gesture, the robots came to life. One and all stepped forward ponderously, ready to take such action as might become necessary. Inez laughed mirthlessly. It looks as if we're fairly caught. After all, he hesitated. After all, in the interest of science, you know, we... Yes, why not? It's the opportunity of a lifetime. A chorus of eager voices bespoke the interest of the men of science. One of the physicists drawled sardonically, "You vivisectionists should be happy under the new regime. You'll have human beings to experiment with instead of dogs and guinea pigs." A surgeon parried, "Not so good for you students of pure science, I'll admit. You'll be working with robots that'll have human brains. They'll outthink you, outcalculate you. There'll be no errors in their computations." "Enough," said Shelby flatly. "We're wasting time. As I said, we will go ahead with the official dignitaries first. That is the work of the surgeons. Meanwhile, the scientists will take up the study of the alternations which are to be made in the mass of the people. All are to be remade." Inez asked, "How about reproduction, the perpetuation of the race? I take it these reconstructions of Rexes will eliminate the sex factor in human life." Hadn't thought of that," grunted Fielding. "Sex is not necessary," Shelby said. "In fact, it is troublesome. However, arrangements will be made to segregate a few thousand females and a number of eugenically acceptable males in order that a supply of new research material will be available for the future." "If the women object?" put in one of the younger surgeons. "You forget the portion of the brain which is the seat of human emotion," Shelby reminded him. "Certain cells will be removed, and only those cells which left which provide for these favored women no more than one desire, that of motherhood." "The males needn't be changed at all," grunted Fielding. Then he was struck with a sudden thought. "Say, how did this Rex come by his power of thinking in the first place?" "Oh, lovely. Selective breeding now. Oh, I mean, it's 1934. Eugenics was in, like, all the sci-fi stories of the time. Like, eugenics was a huge movement in the US and in Germany, and 1934, it was discussed quite a lot. Shelby explained as best he could. "Thank you, Hannah. We made some tests. There seems to have been an unprecedented unnatural transformation, a source of some unknown atomic energy sprang up somewhere in the intricate mechanisms of his brain, probably the generation of what scientists have long searched for in vain, what some of them have called the mind electron. At any rate, he thinks." And with marvelous celerity and accuracy. Fielding contented himself with whistling through his teeth. I don't know what that means, but okay. "Now," announced Shelby, "we will go ahead with the great work." Oh, sorry. I did that in the Fielding voice. That was Shelby. "Now," announced Shelby, "we will go ahead with the great work." And they did. The 22 foremost scientists of the nation submitted to the dictates of a robot. Meanwhile, order was coming out of the chaos in the 11 cities. Men and women, unaware of the fate which had been planned for them, were driven to unaccustomed and uncongenial tasks by unfeeling robots. Soft, uncalloused human hands were at the levers of machines instead of the flexible metallic fingers of the robots. Human minds, which had known nothing more fatiguing than the stereotyped lessons of school days and the pursuit of pleasure in later years, were now set to work at vexing problems of engineering. Human beings were engaged once more in useful work. Of course, it was impossible that all of the labor be performed by humans. The mechanics of existence had become too complicated for that. The operations that were needful merely to keep the great beehives of cities functioning were entirely too numerous. Besides, many necessary tasks were beyond the strength of men whose muscles had softened from disuse and from dissolute living. But the new masters of men, the robots, got all the work out of their unwilling charges that could be obtained in the 10-hour day Rex had decreed. The rest was done by the robots, while their human protégés slept the sleep of sheer exhaustion. Temporarily, the inconsequential amount of governmental activity which was actually required was made purely logical in scope. In each city, the municipal affairs were taken over by the super robot who was in charge. Hi, Shadows of Life. After dispensing with the great majority of office holders and assigning them to really productive tasks in the lower levels, the super robots relayed to the mayors and their councils minute instructions from Rex as to their future deportment in office. It was a sorry time for those who had, for long, held unmerited and quite superfluous positions of power. I've totally been here the whole time, and hey, it's great to have you pop in. You're totally welcome to watch other streamers, but I enjoy having you show up. The wails and complainings of weary human laborers went unheeded by their robot overseers. Whenever men and women dragged their tired bodies to places of meeting and endeavored to voice protest, they were swiftly and roughly dispersed by the vigilant robot police. After 3 long days, they learned to submit in silence to whatever might be demanded of them. Some humans even found a new interest in their tasks. Others, new bodily vigor as their muscles lost their soreness. At least they still had their living quarters during leisure hours, and there was no shortage of heat, food, or water. They did not know that each individual was being carefully card-indexed and studied by the robot minions of Rex. Nor had they any idea of the fate to which they had been consigned. They all were now being classified according to ability and adaptability, never entered, or that all were now being classified according to ability and adaptability, never entered their heads. And great would have been the lamentation had they realized that the new robot dictator had meant exactly what he said when he told them over the newscast that he had come to evolve a new race of beings. Hi, Detective Zen. Most of them would have scoffed had they been told the truth. It was incomprehensible that a man with the special aptitude for piloting a stratosphere plane might be operated upon and deprived of all human desire and emotion, leaving only those sensibilities which would make of him an exceptionally adept navigator of the air lanes. That one, who might be of little value except as a common laborer, should be deprived of his own body and provided with a mechanical one instead, as well as being robbed of all human sentiment and instinct, was still less comprehensible. Yet these very things were being planned. Human brains, minus the elements that made them human, transplanted into the duralumin headpieces of robots. Human beings permitted to retain the outward semblance of the human impulses, the outward semblance of man, but left with only 1 or 2 of the human impulses, minds that were capable of thinking nothing but mathematics, riveting, welding, food synthesis, or childbearing, as the case may be. These were but a few of the characteristics which were to make up the new race of robot men or human robots, and the intended victims did not know. Only the men of science laboring in Rex's hospital and laboratory could have told them, and they kept silence. Since when do old books have web addresses attached to cotton? This is... it's like a beanbag weight. Yeah. It's a weight to weight down the pages. But I know on stream before I've used these. Why are they using aluminum and not like A steal. I don't know. I do like these, but because it's on an angle, these slide and the beanbags don't. So that's why I'm using the beanbag. By this time, President Tucker and the members of his cabinet were recovering from the effects of the brain surgery to which they had been subjected. In another 24 hours, they would be returned to their posts. Gone was their pomposity, their grandiose verbiage, and the vacillation, which always had marked their decisions. Their thoughts now were only those which Rex wished them to have. Hereafter, they would be quick to make decisions and firm in enforcing their mandates, and decisions and mandates of Rex, the dictator. Now, the organization of all public agencies would quickly bring to fruition the full operation of the Master Robot's plan. The new race of hybrid beings would blossom forth. Immersed in their work, and oblivious of all else, the 22 men of science gave little thought to the plight of their fellow men. They knew only that they had learned many new and marvelous things from this robot who seemed to be a man. They had plumbed depths of the human intellect of which they had never dreamed. They discovered many secrets of electronic science which were almost incredible. They saw results to be accomplished that were nothing short of miraculous. Imagine having a dictator like president who would just make mandates without thinking of their people. Who would do that? Yeah, I don't know. I did say earlier that yet again we have a 1934 story that seems oddly relevant to modern day. They were about to give birth to a new race of super creations. That these were to be part human and part machine disturbed them not at all. Only the accomplishment was of importance. Shelby, pale and drawn of face, with expressionless fish eyes gazing out through his thick glasses, had worked with them in the hospital and laboratory until it seemed that he would drop. Between times, he was collaborating with Rex himself on some secret experiment that was carried on behind closed doors. Shelby looked and talked like a robot. But his body was a human one, and he had been greatly overstrained. He could not long stand this pace. Fielding was stirred to pity when he saw him emerge from Rex's secret laboratory this last time. "What's going on in there?" he asked with gruff kindliness. "And why in the devil doesn't he let you get a little rest?" Shelby's eyes were like polished bits of black glass, and his voice was devoid of feeling as he replied, "Rex is experimenting on himself. He is using the center of emotion, which he removed from my brain, using the cells in an effort to provide himself with certain of the human sensibilities. You may as well know it now." "Good heavens!" Fielding roared like a bull. "He's taking human feelings away from millions of men and women, or planning to, and yet he wants those feelings himself. He's a mechanical devil!" "It is not a question of desire," Shelby corrected him. Rex is incapable of desire or envy as yet. He has merely reasoned that he will become the most perfect of moving and thinking creatures if only he can provide himself with such of the human feelings as may be essential in bringing the greatest good to the greatest number of the new beings we are to create. Fielding repeated, softly this time, "Good heavens!" He stared at the little man with the white face and vacant gaze. At this point, the door to the private laboratory opened and Rex strode forth with a test tube in his hand. He passed the tube to Shelby and burst out in swift speech. "I have failed," he said. I have analyzed every living cell in the tube and have isolated the activating force of every human emotion. I have reproduced these forces to perfection with the arrangements of special electronic tubes which have been incorporated into my own mechanical brain. Yet I have failed to produce so much as a semblance of human feeling in my makeup. It is the first failure of Rex and the last. So saying, he stamped back into his own room and slammed the door. An instant later, there was a violent explosion within, and the door by which he had entered was blown from its hinges. Fielding, Shelby, and a few others rushed in. When the smoke had somewhat cleared away, they found Rex, a twisted and broken mass of metal and rubber and glass. The headpiece, which had contained the marvelous thinking robot brain, was completely demolished. "He's committed suicide," gasped Longernon. "Because he was a failure," Fielding added. Shelby corrected them. He thought he had failed, whereas really he succeeded. At least 2 emotions stirred him before he did this, and he did not recognize them. Rage when he dashed from this room and gave me the test tube. Despair when he committed his last act. No, gentlemen, Rex did not fail, and now he is gone. The little man pitched forward into Fielding's arms, unconscious. With the passing of Rex, his fantastic plan collapsed. Hard work by the scientists returned the country to normal. But a thought that lingered faintly in the minds of several of them was voiced by Inez when he said, I'm almost sorry. In one way, it was a great opportunity." Why there's an illustration of a spacecraft at the bottom of the page, who knows? But it's there just to fill some space. But definitely a bit of Cybermen and the Cyber Controller. The ending is very much a commentary on 1934 eugenics, or 1930s eugenics, and the idea of being able to manipulate and create the perfect being, and like that's definitely where this story is coming from. It's social commentary on what was happening in the early 1930s, the eugenics movement, and all that sort of thing. But I definitely see elements, like I said before, there's very much sort of the logical, super strong being, which is basically like the Vulcans in Star Trek, the where operating by pure logic is a failure because it doesn't take into account things that need to be considered. And then the emotionless robot that desperately wants emotions, even though desperation is not possible because they don't have emotions, is very much Commander Data, except he acts a bit more like his brother Lore. And then definitely the converting humans into robots is like Doctor Who's Cybermen. There was certainly some iRobot where like the robot is judgy towards the humans and thinks that the only way to save the humans or help, like, doesn't like that the robots are slaves to the humans, and also feels like the humans will be better off if they don't have the robots to serve them anymore. And, you know, the only way to save the human race is to destroy the human race, that sort of thing. All of those elements are present in this story. And so when Moskowitz called this story a classic, 6 years after it was written, I actually think he was right. I think this story definitely qualifies for the label classic. It is eminently relevant nearly 100 years later, in a way that a lot of stories don't hold up this well. It has commentary on the sort of commentary on a lot of different things that were happening at that time. Yet that commentary is also relevant to things that are happening now. The sort of psychological questions or societal analyses and things like that, that are presented by it, the questions that are there, the elements of it that are there to make you think, have been brought back again and again and again in science fiction works over the 90 some years since it was written. I don't know how many years it is. That's another math thing. 91 years. Yeah. So far, that's one of my favorites of all of them that we've looked at. This is the 7th one we've looked at. For the most part, I'd say all of them have held up really well to the idea of, despite the fact that they were only 6 years old when he called them classics, they kind of all have had elements that have stayed and stuck, and I can definitely see them being classic. Anywho, next month will be Man of Ages by K.F. Ziska, from October of 1934. I know nothing about this story. Ziska is the one that we never even managed to figure out even what KF stands for. We have no information on Ziska, except that this author's name is listed for 2 stories total. Their whole bibliography is 2 stories. We read one last month and we're reading the other next month. So it's the same author that wrote Succubus, which was basically The Little Shop of Horrors. So I'm curious what Man of Ages will be. But that will be April 30th. Our next stream, next Wednesday, being the first Wednesday of the month, we will pick up again the USS Dakota Engineers Journal, which we are getting near the end of, as long as we don't completely digress with curiosity to track down every single element. We're welcome to do that, but that'll just mean that we won't finish it next week and it'll be further into the future. Fine with me. Let's see. Nope. It is the button I needed, but because it takes me back to where I needed to be, but it didn't need to do the face thing again. So I'm just gonna have to make some adjustments. Like I said, I was a little rushed in trying to set up the Stream Deck today. But I have one now. Also, I hope that the new camera was a good experience. I think it was much, much less shaky, especially because I could pause while I had something on screen. I just had to unpause anytime I wanted to move something, but otherwise, if it was going to sit there for a little bit, I could just pause the camera, which I thought worked really well. Let's see. We're going to raid someone or something. So let me see who we might want to drop in on. Ooh. Yeah. We're gonna pop in over on paleontologizing. There's a new dinosaur, Duonicus, a bizarre two-fingered therizinosaur from Mongolia. So we'll pop over because Danny on paleontologizing is featuring that today, and that just seems like a great place to go. I don't believe that the library's account is able to raid his channel. So that one, if anybody's over on the library's channel, we will have to go elsewhere, which I think is, yeah, well, the library's channel will raid over to Monterey Bay Aquarium for the aviary cam, but everybody else, join me in heading over to paleontologizing to learn about a new dinosaur. Thank you everybody for joining me. I hope that it was enjoyable. I enjoyed it. But yeah, hopefully I will see all of you again soon. Until I do, keep exploring history, everybody.